with Vivian, I had some stories about some funny moments that happened on stage, and now I have Charlotte, and she's going to share with you, I think, mostly backstage moments that are pretty funny. What do you want to talk about first?
We'll start with the John Mulaney one. So, I'm a Gen Z kid. We all love John Mulaney, and there was a mic that wasn't working, and we couldn't figure out if it was because there was interference somewhere in the auditorium. So my job was to hold this mic up to my mouth and just start speaking and not stop while I walked around the auditorium from the soundboard in the back to the stage so we could see where it started working, while my co-worker, friend, was up at the soundboard just like listening over the house because it's kind of hard to tell when you're walking. And I panicked because it was my first time ever having to do a sound check because I am supposed to be the one managing the microphones, not using them. I forgot that you can just say the alphabet. I forgot that you can just introduce yourself or count. And my first thought was, what's something long that I have memorized? The John Mulaney 13-year-olds bit. So I started saying it, and people started laughing, and I just kept going, because at that point, I was committed to the bit. Because you can't just start a John Mulaney bit and then stop it halfway down to the stage. So I finished it, and we still hadn't figured out what was supposed to be happening, and that was the point when I remembered you could do the alphabet. So I started doing the alphabet, and we figured out that it wasn't even any interference in the first place, and I did the whole John Mulaney bit for nothing.
But it's good memories now.
It's a good memory. It's an inside joke. People will ask me to just recite it when I'm walking around trying to do my job. So that's something. And there's that story. First one done. My first tech experience. Baby's first tech. I didn't really have a job. I had a job, but it wasn't a real job. They just sort of shoved me in somewhere because my sister got me on tech and the director needed to put me somewhere. So I was assigned as the sound tech liaison, which is not a thing that we have. My job was to sit in the little storage cage that was sort of slightly backstage. And when I say cage, I mean it was a cage. I had a little stool and a little Red Riding Hood basket filled with batteries and mic tape, and I had a headset, at least for the first few rehearsals, at which point the assistant stage manager that sat next to me outside the cage, her headset broke, and so I had to give mine to her, and then she would just tell me whatever was needed. But anyways, I had my little basket, and I would get orders from up at the soundboard, and they would be like, hey, this person needs to go get their batteries changed. I didn't know anyone's name. I wasn't in high school. It was my first show there, so they would just be like, hey, go change Allison's batteries. And I would step out of the cage with my little basket, and I would be like, does anyone know who Allison is? And they would be like, she's a girl with blonde curly hair. And I would be like, okay, do you know where she is? They would be like, girls' dressing room. I go in there, there's 3 different girls with curly blonde hair. I'm like, who's Allison? They're just like, it's me. And I'm like, okay, I need to change your batteries. I'm way shorter than all of them. I'm in 8th grade. It's a disaster. I think I was some sort of amusement to them. It was like, oh, look at that little kid here to change our batteries. It was a whole thing. Anyways, because I didn't have a real job, I ended up getting assigned to do other jobs that also needed to be done. Because the cage also happened to have a little power outlet, a huge, big power outlet in there, along with all the breakers. So it was my job to turn on the sconces at the beginning of the show and turn them off when the show ended. I was also supposed to do some sort of lighting effect by plugging something in that eventually got removed from my responsibilities for reasons I cannot remember. But also, we had to have a paper shredder sound effect, which is something that doesn't really exist. You can't go on Google and search paper shredder sound effect, because apparently those aren't in wide supply. So, what ended up happening was our family had a paper shredder that was very old and we did not use anymore. So, We brought it to the school and sat it down in my little cage. I got a handheld microphone from the director as she walked off the stage at the beginning of the show to just sort of have and hold in the cage for most of the show until the sound effect was needed. And then I would take some extra schedules that got printed off for 10 out of 12, plug the paper shredder in, hold the microphone up in one hand, hold the papers in the other hand, and just sort of try and get it in the little hole that the paper shredder had, and hold it there, and then it would do the paper shredder sound, and it was very loud, and I would just like hold my breath and hope that they couldn't hear it coming from off stage when it was supposed to be coming over the speakers, and it was very, very stressful.
It was a very actually important moment of the show. It's Elf, so it's the part where Buddy gets kind of in big trouble, basically.
Shreds the manuscript or whatever.
So without that sound effect, there's not a good reason why he comes back on stage and is like throwing confetti. Like you need the paper shredder noise to, as an audience, to really understand what's happening.
And I just remembered there was one time when I couldn't get the paper shredder to work, and I panicked, and the guy who was playing Elf was standing outside of the cage door. So I thrusted the handheld microphone at him. I was like, please make a paper shredder sound. He held it up, he went, handed it back to me. You could hear the audience laughing. It was a mess. Worst moment of my life. I'm crying.
You want me to-
The end.
As a parent volunteer, I don't have a ton of stories, but one of my favorite things about being a part of the shows, sort of in my own way, is helping solve problems. So if they have certain set or prop needs or even costume needs, we have basically zero budget. So I try to find ways to make magic happen with $0. For a Christmas show, there was a part, whoever wrote this script had really insane ideas about what type of budget most places have. There were all kinds of crazy things they expected us to pull off in the script. One of them was the reindeer are supposed to run off stage and then basically 2 seconds later come back on stage looking like they've been frozen in ice. We didn't have a lot of time or money to make that happen, so what I came up with was to get cardboard boxes and put some sort of rubber band across, because literally they had 2 seconds, so they needed to be able to run backstage and get these on their feet. And then we wanted to wrap them with something that would make it look like it was ice. We looked at wrapping paper. It was really expensive. We wound up finding iridescent tablecloths that were super cheap. I want to say they were a Dollar Tree. And we wound up wrapping the boxes in the iridescent paper. And that was a huge hit every time, every show. People just
like
thought
little kids and they were like, whoa!
Yeah, it was just, people were like amazed that they ran off stage and then came back on with blocks of ice on their feet. So that was pretty cool. And then another thing that I wound up having to solve was when we did Addams Family, everyone needed to have white hair. To like all of the ancestors needed to look
they're ghosts.
Ghostly.
They're ghosts and ghouls.
Again, no budget. We didn't have a budget to give everyone white wigs or even to buy the spray stuff for everyone. And we tried it and it wasn't super effective. So I went online and asked for help from some other theater friends, and I wound up getting the suggestion of cornstarch. So what I did, I came up with this whole system, which was, I was basically the one in charge of doing this. I filled a sock with cornstarch and tied a knot in the end, and then I would spray their head with hairspray and then basically smack them in the head with the sock full of cornstarch, and then I would spray the hairspray again to sort of seal it in place. And I did that to, I want to say 20 people at least every night before the show. So yeah, I was like, whose turn is it to get smacked in the head with the cornstarch? But it looked pretty good and it was cheap. What else you got?
Last school year, it was my first time being sound chief, mostly because the other two girls that knew how to do sound were in stage management positions, so I was left by default. It was our first time running a rehearsal with the mics, and I was panicking because the soundboard wasn't working. I was trying to unmute people, and it wasn't working. I was panicking and I was like, can we please hold? I ran down, got the other girl that was on assistant stage manager, I think. She came up to look at it, took one look at the soundboard. She was like, the house is muted.
I don't know what that means.
So, the speakers that play through the house, that's all one bar. That's like one thing that you can change the volume of, and it was muted. So I could unmute the performers and turn them up as loud as I wanted. Wasn't gonna do anything because they weren't playing through the house.
So basically fixing it was just that one bar?
Just one single button that I was so panicked because it was my first time having an actual responsibility and I was so stressed that I didn't even see it.
Bet you won't make that mistake again.
Won't make that mistake again. It's the first thing I check. Here's another one. Coming at you with another one. Because that one was short, and I think this one will be short too. It was 2 1-acts, and we didn't have enough headsets. I feel like that one assistant stage manager whose headset broke at the beginning was just like the catalyst. We've never had enough headsets since. And we were at the soundboard, and the stage manager was like 6 feet away from us on the side. So hypothetically, we wouldn't need a headset to hear her cues, because she is, as stated, 6 feet away from us. Maybe the air in between us was especially thick or something because we never heard her. It was my sister. She was the stage manager for that one. And so what we ended up doing was, it was 3 of us, 1 soundboard, and one of the girls had AirPods. So she would give AirPods to me and the other girl because I was in charge of sound effects and she was in charge of like standing on top of the chair to see over the soundboard so she could cue me for the sound effects because sometimes the stage manager would miss the cues for the sound effects and we were FaceTiming with the AirPods with the stage manager so she could cue us for the sound effects and we still ended up missing them. It was a bad time.
Tech rehearsals are important. Fall show is always like a really short rehearsal process and always a little under the gun as far as...
And it didn't help that like half of my sound effects I had to like skip forward in whatever YouTube videos I had to pull up to get it at the right sound. It was like I had this one sound effect, I could play it, and then less than 60 seconds later was my next sound effect, which I had to be skipped 30 seconds into the video for so I could play lip gloss as a guy's ringtone, which was a funny joke, and it got laughs every time, but it was so stressful. We're really bad at ending stories. It was the show after my first show. Second show. Still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to help out. I was still in charge of giving people batteries, but now I was allowed to sit up at the soundboard and just run down instead of staying in the cage. And I had like a little bag with me that had all my batteries in it. And there was this one girl where she had to come off stage just for a second and then come back on, but her batteries were dead. So I was standing off to the side, backstage, waiting for her to come off so I could change her batteries really quick. And I get like a weird feeling, like some sort of premonition. I look back behind me, there's a giant green board, like really tall. It was part of Emerald City for Wizard of Oz, a show I was not there for. And it's just sort of always been there. I didn't know what it was until I asked about it today. And it's falling. It is as tall as the ceiling, basically, and it's falling towards us. And I back away from it, it falls, slams, it's so loud. Apparently nobody else heard it because people come off stage and they're like, whoa, what happened here? And I'm like, it just fell. I changed the girl's batteries and then I hear the assistant stage manager over there calling like, hey, the big green Emerald City board just fell down. Can I get some running crew back here to put it back up? This wasn't in our training. I leave and then later it's put back up, so I guess something happened in between then. It's never fallen since. I dread the day it falls again. I'm scared of it now. Last story. We're so close.
Story time.
Story time. Story time. Okay, so here's a fun little secret. Don't tell anyone that goes to my high school because they don't know about this, except for my sister. But there's a thing at the soundboard where you can plug headphones into it and select a channel and listen into it, even though it might be muted over the house. As long as the microphone's on, you can hear what's being said into it. We use this to get hot gossip. Sometimes, if nobody's doing anything. Most of the time, I'm just listening into it, like going through the channels that aren't on just to make sure there aren't any issues so we can resolve them before the person gets on stage. But I'm listening to this one girl over it. It's a freshman. It's her first show. And she's in the dressing room, and I hear her, talking to her friends, and she says, do they care if we take the microphones off by ourselves? Because it's kind of uncomfortable. The answer is yes. We do care, because you're gonna break it, because you're a freshman, and this is your first show, and we don't trust you. So, I explain the situation to the girl that's turning the soundboard next to me. It's, a slow part of the show. I'm not really needed, which is why I was listening in the first place. She's like, go. So I run down to the dressing room. I open up the door. I say, yes, we do care if you take the microphones off. And I run back up. I hear them over the channel being like, how did she know? And that was a fun moment. The end. Thank you.
Awesome. So I guess the moral of, is there a moral of the story?
Mistakes are made, bad things happen, the show goes on.
Yeah, and eventually you laugh. So I hope you found this video entertaining. If you did, please share it with other people in your life that like theater. And make sure you hit the subscribe so you don't miss my video again on Monday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.